Emily Carter stepped off the bus in the early morning light, the air crisp and biting against her skin. The base seemed enormous, a sprawling patchwork of concrete buildings, fenced training grounds, and endless rows of barracks. She clutched her duffel bag tightly, feeling the weight of both her belongings and the unknown future ahead. Her town had been small, quiet, and predictable, a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. But Emily's decision to enlist had shattered that predictability, earning her polite concern from neighbors, outright criticism from relatives, and whispered doubts from friends who could not comprehend why someone like her would volunteer for a life of danger and discipline. Her father's voice lingered in her memory, calm but firm. Courage isn't always loud, Emily. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's unseen. But it's always there if you let it guide you. Those words had echoed in her mind for months as she packed her bag, studied her uniforms, and imagined the world beyond her small town. Courage, she knew, was not measured by shouting or bravado. It was measured by quiet persistence, by steadiness when fear surged, and by calm resolve when chaos erupted. Emily had spent her entire life cultivating that inner strength, though she had never tested it in ways that mattered, not until now. The other recruits were already milling around the training field. Loud voices dominated the air, boasting about their hometowns, their athletic achievements, and their expectations of glory. Emily kept her head low, letting the noise wash over her. She was intentionally invisible, almost blending into the pavement. She had no need to announce herself. She didn't feel the need to prove anything. But as she moved through the crowd, she noticed the subtle ways people evaluated her. A sideways glance, a dismissive nod, or a fleeting smirk. Some assumed she would break under pressure. That assumption was exactly why she had come, to prove that quiet determination often carried more weight than loud bravado. The drill sergeant approached, his boots thudding against the asphalt with precision. His eyes swept the ranks, sharp and unyielding, landing on Emily briefly before moving on. Most of the recruits flinched under his gaze, but Emily stood straight, shoulders squared, and eyes forward. She did not make a sound, nor did she attempt to impress. There was something in the calm way she held herself that the sergeant seemed to notice, though he did not say so aloud. In that instant, Emily understood a vital truth. Appearances could deceive, but actions and presence would reveal her character faster than any boastful words ever could. Basic training began with the harshest elements of military life. Long marches under the scorching sun, exhausting physical drills, endless repetitions of every motion until it became instinct. Emily struggled, of course. Her muscles ached in ways they never had before. Her hands blistered from handling rifles and equipment, and her lungs burned with every forced sprint across the gravel fields. But each time her body demanded surrender. Her mind reminded her of her father's lesson. Courage could be quiet, but it required persistence. And Emily persisted. She embraced the pain as a teacher, each step a small victory over self-doubt. While other recruits sought attention through exaggerated displays of strength or bravado, Emily's strategy was different. She observed. She learned. She memorized small details, the timing of drills, the cadence of commands, the subtle weaknesses in formations, and the tendencies of her peers. She noticed when someone's uniform was improperly worn, when someone's attention faltered, or when fear crept into a teammate's movements. Her quiet vigilance became a skill, almost invisible to those focused on outward appearances. Yet it was exactly this skill that would eventually set her apart in ways she could not yet imagine. The instructors began to take note. While most of the recruits were distracted by showing off their capabilities, Emily's calm composure and consistent accuracy during exercises drew subtle admiration. She was rarely first in line, rarely the loudest voice in the room, and rarely noticed by the boisterous recruits around her. But when it mattered, her precision was flawless. Whether in shooting drills, obstacle courses, or tactical exercises, she demonstrated an uncanny ability to stay focused under pressure. Her instructors whispered among themselves, recognizing that there was something extraordinary in her steadiness, something that might remain hidden until the moment it truly mattered. Even her peers began to notice, albeit reluctantly. At first, they dismissed her quiet nature as a weakness, joking about her lack of spirit or her inability to lead in group exercises. But as Emily repeatedly excelled where others faltered, the tone shifted from derision to cautious respect. A fellow recruit froze during a particularly demanding tactical simulation, paralyzed by fear of making a mistake. Emily, without fanfare, stepped forward and guided him through the correct procedure, her voice soft but firm. No one cheered, no one noticed in the moment, yet the impact was profound. Emily had saved the exercise from disaster, and in doing so, began to redefine what leadership could look like: calm, unassuming, and deeply effective. By the end of the first month, Emily had carved out a space for herself that was invisible yet powerful. She had no need for recognition. The quiet satisfaction of mastering her own fear, of learning each task thoroughly, was enough. The other recruits began to watch her differently, though they did not yet understand why. Some grudgingly admitted that she seemed uncheckable, almost untouchable in her composure. The sergeants, meanwhile, began giving her subtly harder tasks, testing her endurance and focus, and each time, Emily exceeded expectations without complaint or exaggeration. She was a quiet force, steady, observant, and capable of far more than anyone suspected. At night, when the barracks lights dimmed and the recruits drifted into uneasy sleep, Emily often sat alone, writing in her journal. Her entries were simple but profound, capturing her reflections on the day's challenges, her observations of the people around her, and her quiet affirmations of courage. She wrote about the small victories, mastering a difficult maneuver, successfully guiding a teammate, completing a punishing run without faltering. And she wrote about her motivations, her father's memory, the desire to protect those who could not protect themselves, and the conviction that true heroism was often silent, measured not in applause, but in action. By the time the first phase of training concluded, Emily was no longer merely the quiet recruit. She had become a reliable presence, a steady hand in the chaos, and a source of subtle guidance for those around her. She had yet to face real battle, yet the foundation of courage, focus, and resilience had been firmly laid. While others had sought recognition through noise and spectacle, Emily had quietly built an inner fortress of strength, one that would soon be tested in ways that would transform her from an unassuming recruit into a true hero. The second month of basic training tested Emily in ways she hadn't anticipated. The initial shock of military life, the endless drills, the early mornings, and the physical exhaustion had begun to settle into a rhythm, but the challenges were only growing. Recruits were pushed to their limits, their weaknesses exposed with relentless precision. Emily, however, approached each day with the same quiet determination she had carried from the beginning. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, rarely drew attention to herself, and yet her actions began to ripple across the barracks in ways that didn't go unnoticed. One morning, during a live fire exercise, the instructors organized a tactical scenario meant to challenge the recruits' decision-making under pressure. The objective was straightforward: secure a simulated enemy position while coordinating with teammates. Loud, confident recruits immediately assumed leadership roles, shouting orders, charging ahead, and often putting themselves and others at risk. Emily, as always, observed. She studied the terrain, calculated the safest paths, and noted the abilities and limitations of her fellow recruits. When one of the team leaders faltered, panicked at a sudden explosion, Emily quietly stepped forward and offered guidance. Her directions were precise and calm, guiding her team through the exercise with an effectiveness that even the instructors couldn't ignore. Her reputation began to grow, though subtly. The louder recruits still mocked her quiet demeanor, calling her shadow behind her back, but they could not deny that she consistently succeeded where they failed. Emily's approach was methodical. She mastered every drill, learned the most efficient way to move, and maintained situational awareness even under extreme stress. Her fellow recruits began to notice that while they were running in panic or shouting orders ineffectively, Emily seemed unshakable. There was a confidence in her silence, a steady intelligence that could not be undermined by noise or chaos. Slowly, grudging respect began to replace doubt. Physical training, once a source of struggle, became an area where Emily began to shine in small but meaningful ways. She was not the fastest runner, nor the strongest lifter, but her endurance and consistency were unmatched. While others sprinted ahead and collapsed mid-run, Emily maintained a steady pace, her breathing controlled, her steps precise. In obstacle courses, she observed the errors of others, learning the most efficient ways to climb, balance, and navigate. When a teammate fell or struggled, Emily was always the first to offer a hand, not with words of praise or encouragement, but with quiet, effective assistance. Her strength was measured in results, not theatrics. By the third week, Emily's impact extended beyond individual performance. Her calm presence began influencing the dynamics of her unit. When tension flared, when frustration and fear threatened to disrupt coordination, Emily's composure became a stabilizing force. Recruits who had mocked her now found themselves instinctively following her example, mimicking her deliberate movements, and listening to her, even when she had not given a formal order. The drill sergeants started assigning her more responsibility, observing how she led informally without overtly claiming authority. Emily's quiet leadership was emerging organically, grounded in competence rather than ego. One particularly grueling day, the recruits were faced with a scenario that tested teamwork under extreme conditions. A mock night operation simulating the infiltration of an enemy compound. Visibility was limited, the terrain uneven, and the objective demanded careful coordination. Panic quickly spread as recruits fumbled with equipment and miscommunicated. Emily, drawing on her meticulous observations of prior exercises, stepped in without hesitation. She guided her team through the darkened field, silently correcting mistakes and anticipating challenges before they arose. By the end of the exercise, her unit had successfully completed the mission, while other groups struggled to recover from their errors. Though the accomplishment went largely unspoken, her instructors quietly acknowledged her skill. Emily's growing reputation did not come without tension. Some recruits resented her success, viewing her calm, quiet efficiency as a threat to their own ego-driven attempts at recognition. They whispered behind her back, plotted small acts of mischief, and tested her patience in subtle ways. But Emily remained undeterred. She had learned early that courage and determination were not about winning popularity contests. She focused solely on excellence, on preparing herself and helping her teammates, on observing and learning. This resilience, both mental and emotional, was beginning to define her not just as a capable recruit, but as a natural leader. Her instructors took special note of one of Emily's most defining moments. During a simulated rescue scenario, a fellow recruit panicked when faced with a realistic obstacle, crossing a makeshift bridge over a simulated minefield. Emily calmly assessed the situation, guided her teammates' steps, and successfully navigated the team through the challenge. The scenario was designed to test nerves and decision-making, and while many faltered, Emily's quiet decisiveness carried the day. Captain Harris, observing from a distance, remarked to a colleague, "She's not loud, but she sees everything. She'll make a good leader if she ever needs to." Beyond exercises and simulations, Emily's character shone in everyday moments. She volunteered quietly to assist medics in caring for minor injuries, helped others maintain their uniforms and gear, and even tutored struggling recruits on navigation and tactics. She did these things not for praise, but because she understood that success in battle depended on mutual support and competence. Her empathy was as strong as her discipline. Slowly, her peers began to approach her for advice, respecting her insights even if they still struggled to reconcile them with her quiet demeanor. By the end of the second month, Emily had quietly transformed from a timid, overlooked recruit into a cornerstone of her unit. Her name was still unknown to the majority outside her immediate team, but within the barracks, her reputation was growing. She had demonstrated that strength was not always loud, that leadership could be quiet, and that courage often manifested in precision, focus, and reliability rather than spectacle. She had become indispensable, though she never sought recognition, never bragged, never allowed ego to overshadow her mission. That night, in the dim light of the barracks, Emily sat again with her journal. She reflected on her progress, recording small victories and lessons learned. She wrote about the moments when she had guided teammates through fear, when her calm presence had stabilized chaotic exercises, and when her attention to detail had prevented errors. Most importantly, she wrote about the subtle satisfaction she derived not from praise, but from knowing she was becoming someone her team could rely upon when the stakes were highest. Emily's journey was only beginning, but the foundation was firm. Courage, skill, and quiet determination had become inseparable from who she was. And as she closed her journal and lay down on her cot, Emily knew that these months of grueling training were preparing her for more than just tests and simulations. They were preparing her for moments where courage would demand action under fire, where quiet resolve would need to become decisive leadership. The battlefield, she realized, would not be a place for noise or theatrics. It would be a place where her steady presence, her calm mind, and her unwavering determination could make all the difference. She was still the quiet recruit in appearance, but inside, she was quietly becoming extraordinary. The transport plane descended through the dusty clouds, carrying Emily Carter and her unit to a distant, volatile conflict zone. The desert stretched endlessly beneath them, a sea of golden sand punctuated by jagged cliffs and scattered settlements. Emily's heart thrummed not with fear, but with measured anticipation. This was no longer training. This was real. The lessons she had absorbed during months of grueling exercises, the endurance, the focus, the ability to stay calm under pressure, would finally be put to the ultimate test. Her fellow recruits were a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Some whispered plans of heroism, already envisioning medals and accolades. Others fidgeted with their equipment, overtaken by the unfamiliar weight of their rifles and gear. Emily observed all of it quietly, noting the strengths and weaknesses around her. She had learned that understanding the people you work with was as vital as knowing the terrain you would traverse. Every detail mattered, the way a teammate held a weapon, how quickly they followed commands, or even how they reacted under the smallest stressors. In war, these subtleties could mean the difference between life and death. The plane landed with a jolt, sand blowing into every crevice. The soldiers filed out into the harsh sun, their boots sinking slightly into the hot, dry earth. Dust clung to uniforms, and heat radiated off the barren landscape. Emily's senses were heightened. The world was no longer a controlled training environment, but a living, breathing battlefield where mistakes had consequences. Yet, as always, she remained calm, methodical, and aware. She checked her gear meticulously, ensuring nothing was overlooked, while others were distracted by nerves or bravado. Their commanding officer, Captain Harris, gathered the unit for their first briefing in the field. Satellite maps, reconnaissance photos, and intelligence reports were displayed, outlining objectives. Patrol a strategic region, gather information, and maintain security. Emily absorbed every detail, quietly noting potential risks the others seemed to overlook. Some information was conflicting, creating gaps that could jeopardize the mission. She mentally marked the inconsistencies, but said nothing aloud. Experience had taught her that insight with action was pointless. The right moment to intervene was always more important than speaking too soon. Deployment routines quickly replaced training drills. Days were long, scorching, and punctuated by tension. Soldiers patrolled arid landscapes, navigated rocky outcrops, and monitored radio communications. Night brought little relief, as sleep was often interrupted by distant explosions or the constant hum of distant engines. Many recruits struggled to adjust. Panic, frustration, and fatigue manifested in arguments, careless mistakes, or poorly executed patrols. Emily, however, remained a stabilizing force. She approached each challenge calmly, checking equipment, guiding hesitant teammates, and anticipating obstacles before they arose. Where others reacted emotionally, she responded with clarity. Her reputation among the unit began to grow, quietly but undeniably. Captain Harris noticed her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to read situations intuitively. During a patrol where the terrain shifted unexpectedly, several soldiers began arguing over the safest path, losing focus on potential dangers. Emily stepped forward, calmly suggesting an alternate route that minimized exposure to enemy observation and potential ambush. Her teammates followed, initially hesitant, then increasingly reliant on her judgment. She did not boast or demand attention. Her leadership was subtle, earned through competence rather than words. Emily's interactions extended beyond strategy and tactics. She became a quiet mentor to those struggling with the psychological toll of deployment. Some recruits were overwhelmed by the constant threat of attack, the isolation, and the relentless heat. Emily listened without judgment, offering guidance through actions more than words, helping someone repair gear, sharing water, or quietly showing how to navigate the terrain safely. Her empathy created a subtle bond of trust, and soon, soldiers who had once dismissed her were seeking her advice, realizing that her calm was a resource in itself. The first taste of actual combat loomed closer with each passing day. Intelligence reports indicated potential insurgent activity in a nearby valley. Captain Harris briefed the unit for a reconnaissance mission. The tension was palpable. This was different from training. No simulations could fully prepare soldiers for the unpredictability of the enemy, the hostility of the environment, or the weight of responsibility. Emily mentally reviewed every lesson, every drill, and every observation she had made during training. She prepared herself to act decisively when the moment came, understanding that preparation was the first shield against chaos. The night before deployment, Emily sat alone, examining maps and satellite images by dim lamplight. She noted inconsistencies in terrain reports and radio signal patterns. Something about the layout of the valley felt off. She voiced her concerns to her squad leader quietly, but they were dismissed, attributed to overthinking or excessive caution. Emily did not argue. She had learned that persistence was more effective than insistence, and that the moment to act would present itself when necessary. Her preparation was private, her strategy silent, but she knew she was ready for what lay ahead. When dawn broke, the unit moved into position. The sun rose over jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Emily led from the middle of her formation, observing every movement and monitoring her surroundings. Every step was calculated, every glance measured. Her training had taught her to anticipate danger, to stay calm under pressure, and to act when decisive moments arrived. She was quiet, yet fully present, aware of every teammate's position, every potential threat, and every opportunity to ensure success. The battlefield, unlike training grounds, was unpredictable, but Emily was prepared. As the unit approached the designated location, Tension rose. The terrain was rougher than expected. Communication lines flickered, and the soldiers' nerves began to fray. Yet Emily's presence was a stabilizing anchor. She moved with purpose, offering subtle guidance to those around her, ensuring that even small mistakes did not escalate into critical errors. Her calmness spread like a quiet contagion. Even the most anxious soldiers followed her lead without knowing why. In a world where chaos threatened to overwhelm, Emily's steady focus became a beacon of reliability. By the end of the first week in the field, Emily had already distinguished herself in ways that were not immediately visible to outsiders. She had prevented minor accidents, corrected tactical missteps, and quietly ensured the well-being of her team. Captain Harris began to rely on her judgment in planning patrols, often asking for her input when devising strategies. Her peers, though still adjusting to the realities of combat, began to see the quiet recruit as someone indispensable, not for flashiness or bravado, but for her clarity, skill, and unwavering presence. Emily's quiet strength had become a foundation for the unit's effectiveness. Even in moments of downtime, Emily's discipline and foresight continued to set her apart. She maintained her journal, documenting daily experiences, observations, and reflections. She recorded small lessons: how to navigate hidden dangers, how to communicate silently with teammates, how to maintain calm under stress. These records were not for recognition, but for learning, preparing her for the bigger challenges ahead. Emily understood that the battlefield would demand more than courage. It would require intelligence, intuition, and the quiet ability to guide others when the situation demanded it. As the days passed, Emily's confidence grew alongside her competence. She had entered the deployment as a quiet recruit, largely overlooked by those around her. Yet her actions, her calm presence, and her meticulous approach were slowly redefining her identity within the unit. Soldiers began to look to her for guidance. Captain Harris began to trust her instincts, and even those who had doubted her abilities were forced to acknowledge her skill. Emily had discovered that true strength was not in volume, but in focus, calm, and decisive action lessons that would soon be tested in the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. And as the unit prepared for its first real engagement, Emily stood quietly among her fellow soldiers, her rifle slung across her shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon, mind cataloging every detail. She was ready. The quiet recruit, unnoticed by many, was no longer just learning or observing. She was prepared to act, to lead in moments when hesitation could cost lives. Emily Carter had crossed the threshold from training into reality, and though she remained humble and reserved, she was already becoming the steady heart her unit would depend on when chaos inevitably struck. The sun had barely risen over the desert horizon when Emily Carter's unit gathered for a briefing that would set the stage for their most critical mission yet. The target was a remote valley, strategically important and rumored to harbor insurgent forces. Intelligence reports were sketchy, and satellite imagery offered only partial information about the terrain. Maps showed uneven ridges, dry riverbeds, and scattered settlements, but gaps in data left room for deadly surprises. Emily studied every document carefully, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. Something didn't sit right. The briefing was led by Captain Harris, who outlined objectives with measured clarity. The unit was to secure the valley, gather information, and establish a forward operating position. The tone of the briefing was cautious but confident. The mission seemed manageable on paper. Recruits murmured among themselves, some expressing eagerness to prove themselves, others nervous anticipation. Emily listened quietly, absorbing every word, cross-referencing maps with the intel she had memorized. The inconsistencies she noted were subtle: a slight misalignment of terrain, an unusual lack of prior patrol reports, but to Emily, they were significant red flags. She voiced her concerns softly to her squad leader after the briefing. The satellite images don't match the maps. And the valley's ridges aren't where they should be. Something feels off. Her squad leader dismissed her observation with a nod, attributing it to overcaution. "We'll handle it when we get there," he said, brushing off her concern. Emily didn't argue. She had learned that persistence alone was not enough. Timing was essential. The right moment to act would present itself on the ground. For now, she would prepare silently, mentally mapping contingencies and possible escape routes. As the unit mobilized, the desert seemed alive with tension. Vehicles rumbled across the sandy plains, dust rising in thick clouds behind them. Soldiers maintained formation, weapons secured, eyes scanning the horizon. Emily positioned herself strategically within the convoy, not at the front, not at the rear, but in the middle, where she could observe, analyze, and react without drawing unnecessary attention. She studied her fellow soldiers, noting who appeared confident, who seemed hesitant, and who might falter under pressure. Each detail would matter. During the approach, Emily's instincts sharpened. The terrain was rougher than expected, with hidden gullies and jagged outcroppings that could conceal enemy positions. Patterns in the radio chatter were irregular. Some communication lines showed brief interference. Emily's pulse remained steady, her mind cataloging every anomaly. She rehearsed in her head the steps she would take if the convoy were attacked, envisioning how to guide her team to safety, how to use the terrain to their advantage, and how to coordinate counteractions without panic. In moments like this, Emily's quiet preparation gave her a sense of control amid uncertainty. The convoy reached the valley's entrance by late morning. The sun blazed overhead, casting stark shadows across the ridges. Emily scanned the high ground, noting unusual formations of rocks and vegetation that could hide threats. Her earlier concerns now felt even more pressing. She noticed that the valley floor was deceptively narrow, constraining movement and leaving little room for maneuver if an ambush occurred. As the vehicles moved in, a subtle unease settled over her. She wasn't afraid. She had learned to control fear, but her instincts screamed that danger was imminent. Her team moved carefully, following standard protocols, but Emily's mind was already running multiple contingency plans. She positioned herself where she could observe both flanks, alerting silently to any irregularities. Her calm composure began to influence those around her. Recruits who had been tense relaxed slightly under her steady gaze. She gave subtle signals, slight adjustments in positioning and posture, guiding her team with unspoken communication. In her quiet way, Emily had begun to lead not through authority, but through clarity and presence. By midday, the convoy had penetrated deeper into the valley. Emily's unease grew. She noticed inconsistencies in the landscape, ridges that seemed unnaturally smooth, shadows that didn't align with the sun, and subtle disturbances in the sand, suggesting recent movement. She raised the possibility of traps or hidden forces to her squad leader again. This time, a few other soldiers began to notice her observations and quietly checked their own notes. Emily's ability to perceive threats that others missed was beginning to earn grudging acknowledgement, though no one yet understood the full depth of her foresight. The convoy paused briefly for a reconnaissance check. Soldiers dismounted, scanning the high ground, while Captain Harris consulted maps. Emily positioned herself near the center, observing every motion and maintaining awareness of the surroundings. Her mind ran simulations. If an ambush occurred from elevated ridges, which vehicles would be hit first? Where would she lead survivors? How could she redirect fire effectively? And how could communication lines be restored under attack? She didn't speak these plans aloud yet. She waited for the right moment, when her actions could save lives, rather than simply voice concern. Hours passed. The unit advanced cautiously, tension thick in the air. Emily maintained an almost unnatural calm, noting subtle sounds and movements that others overlooked. A displaced rock here, A shadow shifting there, the echo of distant footsteps. Each observation reinforced her suspicion. The intelligence they had received was incomplete, and the valley could be a trap. She prepared herself mentally for rapid decision-making, rehearsing every step in her mind. Every member of the convoy, every vehicle, and every potential path was accounted for in her planning. Her foresight became a shield against uncertainty. Finally, the convoy reached a narrow section of the valley. Emily's instincts flared. The high ridges loomed ominously, providing perfect positions for enemy forces to strike. Communication lines suddenly flickered with interference. Dust swirled unnaturally in the wind. Her internal alarms sounded louder than ever. She signaled subtly to a nearby teammate, adjusting their position and alerting them to cover potential angles. Her calm decisiveness was contagious, spreading through her immediate group. They moved in tighter, more coordinated formations, ready to react. Emily knew, deep down, that the moment of truth was approaching. As the unit prepared to continue forward, Emily took a final deliberate scan of the terrain. Every detail she had memorized, every subtle anomaly she had observed, pointed to one conclusion. The valley was a trap, and an ambush was imminent. She mentally rehearsed the steps she would take to guide her team, stabilize the unit, and respond to the sudden chaos that she expected. The sun glared down, the air shimmered in heat waves, and Emily stood quietly, every sense alert, ready to act. The quiet recruit had sensed danger before anyone else, and she understood that the survival of her team could depend on her next moves. As the convoy pressed forward, Emily's instincts would soon be tested to their fullest. Her silent observations, meticulous preparation, and unwavering focus positioned her to make decisions that could save lives or, if ignored, could result in disaster. In that moment, Emily Carter embodied the truth she had lived by all her life. Courage is not always loud. Heroism is not always celebrated immediately, and the quietest minds often perceive threats the loudest voices cannot see. The valley had appeared deceptively calm in the early morning sun, its ridges bathed in golden light. Emily Carter's instincts, honed through months of meticulous observation and quiet preparation, screamed a warning that the others hadn't yet acknowledged. The convoy advanced slowly, vehicles crunching over gravel, dust clouds trailing behind them, engines humming a tense rhythm. Soldiers scanned the ridges and distant hills, but most were distracted, relying on their confidence rather than caution. Emily's eyes, however, were alive with scrutiny, noting shadows, unusual rock formations, and subtle movements that hinted at hidden danger. Then it came. The first explosion shattered the valley's silence, sending a plume of smoke into the sky and throwing the convoy into chaos. The ambush was sudden and brutal. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Rocks and debris sprayed across the sand, and shouts of alarm filled the air. Soldiers dove for cover instinctively, but panic rippled through the unit. Vehicles stalled under fire, and communication lines were disrupted. Emily's heart remained steady, her mind racing through the contingency plans she had rehearsed in silence. The situation was dire, but clarity, not panic, would be their lifeline. Captain Harris shouted orders, but his voice was nearly drowned out by the deafening sound of gunfire. The unit was pinned down, unable to maneuver effectively under the enemy's superior positioning. Soldiers were taking hits, and confusion spread like wildfire. Emily's gaze swept across the valley, assessing positions, calculating angles, and identifying safe paths. She took a deep breath and moved decisively. There was no hesitation, no fear-driven impulse, only the precise execution of what she had mentally prepared for weeks. Her voice, calm but commanding, cut through the chaos. Form up. Cover each other. Move to the left ridge. Her teammates, initially startled by the quiet recruit issuing orders in the middle of an ambush, instinctively followed. Emily's clarity under pressure provided a stabilizing force. She guided soldiers to better positions, covered their flanks, and ensured that each movement minimized exposure to enemy fire. She relayed information through the jammed radios, improvising signals to coordinate with nearby vehicles. Every decision was deliberate, grounded in tactical understanding rather than instinctive fear. Emily's quiet preparation had transformed into decisive action, and the unit began to regain cohesion under her guidance. Amid the gunfire, Emily noticed a critical threat. An enemy machine gun nest had been concealed among a rocky outcrop to the right, threatening the convoy's vehicles. Without hesitation, she signaled a small group of able soldiers to flank the position. Her instructions were precise, clear, and delivered with a calm authority that left no room for doubt. Take the ridge, disable their fire, cover each other, move fast. The team executed flawlessly, their movements synchronized thanks to Emily's foresight and instructions. The machine gun nest was neutralized, opening a path for the remaining convoy vehicles to advance safely. Meanwhile, Emily kept track of every soldier's location, making real-time adjustments as the battle unfolded. A young recruit froze under fire, paralyzed by fear, and Emily sprinted to his side, guiding him to cover and steadying his nerves with quiet words. Another soldier's weapon jammed. She assessed the situation, handed him a spare rifle, and positioned him strategically to return fire. Her ability to multitask under extreme stress, to balance the immediate threats with the broader tactical picture, was remarkable. She was no longer just a recruit. She had become the heart of the unit's defensive effort. The ambush escalated, with enemy forces attempting to encircle the convoy from multiple directions. Emily's foresight proved invaluable. She identified vulnerable points, repositioned soldiers, and improvised new defensive positions. Her actions stabilized the unit, preventing what could have been a catastrophic collapse. Captain Harris, temporarily incapacitated after a near miss, had to rely entirely on Emily's quick thinking to maintain order. He realized, in awe, that the quiet recruit who had been overlooked for months was now the central figure in ensuring the unit's survival. Amid the chaos, Emily also anticipated the enemy's potential retreats and reinforcements. She spotted a narrow ravine that could serve as a flanking route, allowing her small team to attack the enemy's vulnerable side without exposing the main convoy. Without hesitation, she led the maneuver herself, moving swiftly, silently, and decisively. The flanking attack caught the insurgents off guard, allowing the convoy to regain momentum. Soldiers who had once doubted her competence now followed her lead without question, relying entirely on her calm authority and tactical acumen. As the battle raged on, Emily continued to coordinate with medics, ensuring that wounded soldiers were stabilized and evacuated safely. Her calm presence reassured the injured and prevented further panic among the team. She moved from soldier to soldier, administering aid, giving instructions, and maintaining situational awareness. Every action was deliberate. Every decision was rooted in preparation and focus. Emily had become the unspoken commander on the ground, her quiet strength turning what could have been chaos into a coordinated defense. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The enemy's initial advantage waned under Emily's strategic guidance. The convoy slowly pushed forward, regaining territory and establishing secure positions. Soldiers who had entered the valley in fear now moved with renewed confidence, their trust in Emily absolute. They had witnessed the transformation of a quiet recruit into a decisive leader whose calm and intelligence had saved lives. Emily herself remained humble, never celebrating, never drawing attention to her own heroism. Her focus was always on the mission and the safety of her unit. By the time reinforcements arrived, the valley was under control. The ambush had been neutralized, casualties minimized, thanks to Emily's quick thinking and leadership. Captain Harris, recovering from his earlier injury, finally assessed the situation fully. He turned to Emily with a mixture of disbelief and respect. "Carter, you saved this unit," he said quietly. Emily shook her head. "We all did," she replied, her eyes scanning the remaining terrain for any lingering threats. She was already thinking ahead, planning the next moves, ensuring no one let their guard down. The aftermath of the ambush left the valley scarred, vehicles damaged, and soldiers weary but alive. Emily moved among them, checking on each teammate, offering quiet encouragement and maintaining order. Reporters would later call it a turning point, but for Emily, it was simply the result of preparation, focus, and courage. The quiet recruit had finally revealed the depth of her abilities under fire. She had anticipated the danger, guided her team with precision, and taken actions that had saved countless lives. Her heroism was unassuming, effective, and transformative. As night fell over the valley, Emily sat briefly, exhausted but alert. The stars glimmered overhead, distant and indifferent, while the desert air cooled around her. She reflected on the day, the fear, the chaos, the split-second decisions, and the quiet strength that had carried her through. She had faced the unthinkable and emerged not only alive, but a leader in the eyes of her peers. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Courage is often quiet, unseen, and steady. Emily Carter had lived that truth, and in doing so, she had changed the fate of her unit. The ambush had left Emily's unit battered but not broken. The valley, scarred by explosions and gunfire, bore silent testimony to the intensity of the confrontation. Emily Carter surveyed the terrain, her eyes sharp, calculating the next move. The enemy was still entrenched on elevated ridges, their positions fortified and deadly. Soldiers were weary, but Emily's mind was clear. Every detail of the landscape, every movement of her comrades, and every potential route of attack was catalogued. She knew that waiting for reinforcements to fully arrive would give the enemy time to regroup, and she could not afford that delay. Her first priority was to stabilize the unit. Soldiers who had once frozen under fire now looked to her for guidance. "Form up," she ordered, her voice calm but firm. "We move together. Cover your partner, watch the ridges, and trust your training." Her presence was a stabilizing anchor. As her team adjusted positions, Emily assessed which soldiers were capable of following a flanking maneuver and which needed to remain with the main group. Every decision was deliberate. Every action calculated to maximize their effectiveness while minimizing risk. Emily's mind raced through possible strategies. The enemy's elevated position gave them a clear advantage, but their focus had been on the initial ambush. A flank attack, if executed correctly, could disrupt their formation and allow the convoy to advance. She quickly identified a narrow ravine leading to the enemy's right flank. The path was treacherous, but it offered concealment and the element of surprise. Emily gathered a small, capable team of soldiers who had performed well under fire and briefed them quietly. "We move fast, we stay low, we take them by surprise. Stick together, cover each other, and trust me," she instructed. The team moved swiftly through the ravine, the sun beating down, sand crunching under their boots. Every sound, every movement was scrutinized. Emily kept the team coordinated, signaling silently to adjust formations and anticipate obstacles. The enemy, focused on the main convoy, did not detect their approach. Emily's calm decisiveness allowed her team to maneuver with precision, advancing toward the ridge without alerting the opposition. Her quiet leadership had transformed fear into controlled action. Soldiers who had doubted her abilities now moved with absolute trust. When they reached the base of the ridge, Emily paused briefly, scanning enemy positions. She identified the machine gun nests, sniper posts, and defensive clusters. Timing was crucial. She signaled her team to hold while she assessed angles for effective engagement. Using hand signals and whispered commands, she positioned her soldiers strategically, ensuring each had clear lines of sight and mutual cover. The moment to strike would come only once they were perfectly synchronized, and Emily's patience and attention to detail would make the difference between success and disaster. With a deep breath, Emily initiated the attack. The team surged upward, taking enemy positions by surprise. Gunfire erupted, but the initial shock of the flank maneuver gave them the advantage. Emily moved with precision, directing soldiers to suppress fire, disarm enemy combatants, and secure key points. Every command was calm, measured, and unambiguous. Soldiers who had panicked during the ambush now executed orders flawlessly, their trust in Emily absolute. The ridge that had seemed impenetrable moments before now became a target of their coordinated assault. The main convoy, observing the flanking maneuver, gained momentum. Seeing Emily and her team take control of the right flank inspired renewed confidence. Soldiers who had been pinned down rose with purpose, following the plan Emily had silently orchestrated. The enemy, caught between two coordinated assaults, began to falter. Emily's understanding of terrain, timing, and troop psychology had turned chaos into opportunity. Her calm decisiveness spread through the ranks, converting fear into calculated aggression. As the flanking team pushed forward, Emily continued to guide them, positioning snipers to cover vulnerable approaches, coordinating suppressive fire, and ensuring that no one moved without support. Each action minimized risk while maximizing the tactical advantage. The enemy's defensive lines began to crumble under the pressure of coordinated attack, and the convoy advanced steadily. Emily's ability to see multiple layers of the battlefield, simultaneously anticipating threats, managing resources, and keeping morale high was extraordinary. She was no longer just a recruit. She was the orchestrator of a turning point. In the thick of the assault, Emily noticed a young soldier trapped by enemy fire. Without hesitation, she moved to his position, returning fire while guiding him to cover. Her calm under pressure inspired those around her to act with confidence. Moments like these, small but critical, reinforced the trust and cohesion of the unit. Soldiers who had once doubted her courage now witnessed it firsthand. Emily's quiet resolve had transformed her team, proving that leadership is not always loud, but can be decisive in the most critical moments. By mid-afternoon, the tide of battle had shifted decisively. Emily's flanking maneuver had disrupted the enemy's formations, neutralized key defensive positions, and allowed the convoy to advance through the valley. Her small team held elevated positions, providing cover and guidance for others. Captain Harris, observing from the center of the action, finally acknowledged what had become undeniable. Emily Carter, the quiet recruit, had changed the course of the battle. She had demonstrated not just courage, but tactical brilliance under extreme pressure. The final moments of the counterattack involved securing remaining enemy positions and ensuring that no ambush points remained. Emily coordinated with medics, engineering units, and remaining soldiers to stabilize the battlefield. Wounded soldiers were evacuated efficiently, defensive positions were reinforced, and the valley was slowly brought under their control. Emily's meticulous planning, calm execution, and courageous action had transformed a potentially devastating ambush into a decisive victory. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert valley, Emily finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. Dust clung to her uniform. Her boots were worn, and her body ached, yet her mind was clear. She had led a flanking maneuver that turned the tide of battle, guided her team through chaos, and ensured that lives were saved. Soldiers who had doubted her abilities now looked to her with respect, admiration, and trust. Emily had proven that quiet courage, strategic insight, An unwavering focus could achieve what sheer force alone could not. That night, as the unit set up temporary defensive positions, Emily sat alone for a moment, recording the events in her journal. She wrote about the strategies that had worked, the mistakes she had corrected in real time, and the bravery of her comrades. She did not write about herself or seek recognition. Her focus remained on lessons learned and preparation for what might come next. In her mind, the battle had revealed a truth she had always known. True leadership is measured by action, clarity, and the ability to inspire confidence without demanding it. The valley, once a scene of potential disaster, now bore witness to Emily Carter's transformation. From a quiet, unassuming recruit, she had become the tactical heart of her unit. Her calm under fire, strategic foresight, and decisive leadership had not only saved lives, but had also set a new standard for what heroism could look like. The soldiers would carry her example forward, and Emily herself knew that this was only the beginning. The real challenges were yet to come, but she was ready. The valley had fallen silent, but the air was heavy with the residue of conflict. Smoke drifted from scorched earth, shattered vehicles, and smoldering positions where enemy forces had once entrenched themselves. Emily Carter, still alert despite the adrenaline drain, moved carefully through the battlefield, assessing the situation. The ambush had been brutal, but her calm leadership and tactical foresight had turned the tide. Now, in the eerie quiet following the chaos, she focused on her unit-wounded soldiers, exhausted comrades, and the scattered remnants of their vehicles. Her first priority was ensuring the safety and care of the injured. Medics worked quickly to stabilize those hurt during the engagement, but Emily assisted wherever she could. She guided soldiers with broken limbs to shelter, checked the positions of those still under threat, and provided immediate tactical advice to maintain a defensive perimeter. Even in exhaustion, her mind remained sharp, calculating potential threats and planning contingencies for the night. She moved from soldier to soldier, quietly reassuring them, reinforcing positions, and demonstrating the same calm competence that had carried her through the ambush. Captain Harris finally emerged from a temporary command post, surveying the aftermath with a mixture of relief and disbelief. He saw the soldiers regrouped, positions secured, and the enemy effectively neutralized. His eyes swept over Emily, noting her composed presence amid the chaos. For months, she had been the quiet recruit, the overlooked soldier who followed orders without fanfare. Now, he recognized that she had become the linchpin of their survival, orchestrating maneuvers and stabilizing morale with quiet, unassuming authority. Emily's comrades began to gather in small clusters, sharing news of friends, checking equipment, and tending to minor injuries. The psychological toll of the battle was apparent. Exhaustion, fear, and relief mingled in equal measure. Some soldiers were shaking, unable to speak, overwhelmed by what they had survived. Emily moved among them, quietly offering guidance, organizing medical attention, and calming those whose nerves had frayed. She did not speak of heroism or personal accomplishment. Her focus remained entirely on ensuring the unit's cohesion and safety. Her example inspired confidence, even in those moments of fatigue and fear. The night brought new challenges. As the sun dipped below the horizon, temperatures dropped sharply in the desert valley. Soldiers were forced to contend with exhaustion, dehydration, and the physical toll of combat. Emily oversaw the distribution of supplies, ensured that defensive positions were reinforced, and quietly organized rotations for sentries. Even in darkness, her vigilance never wavered. She moved through the camp like a silent guardian, eyes scanning the terrain, assessing potential risks, and ensuring that no lapse in discipline or attention could jeopardize the unit. During brief moments of rest, soldiers began to recognize the impact of Emily's leadership. Conversations shifted from recounting the chaos of the ambush to acknowledging her calm decisiveness under fire. Whispered praises circulated, how she had guided the flanking maneuver, how she had coordinated teams, and how her foresight had prevented casualties. Though Emily herself remained modest, the acknowledgement from her peers marked a turning point. The quiet recruit was no longer invisible. Her heroism, though understated, had become undeniable. Captain Harris convened a debriefing early the next morning. The unit gathered, many still sore and weary, to review the engagement. Satellite imagery, radio logs, and field reports were examined in detail. Emily contributed, offering precise observations about enemy movements, terrain challenges, and team coordination. Her insights were not theoretical. They were practical, informed by first-hand experience and meticulous observation. For the first time, her expertise was recognized formally, her voice listened to with respect rather than polite tolerance. The aftermath also revealed the human cost of the battle. Several soldiers had sustained serious injuries, and Emily moved from one to another, ensuring they received proper care. She coordinated with medics to prioritize treatment, monitored those at risk of shock, and offered quiet reassurance. In one instance, a young recruit who had frozen during the ambush expressed guilt and fear. Emily knelt beside him, guiding him through breathing exercises and reminding him that his survival and learning were more important than perfection. Her empathy, like her tactical skill, was instrumental in restoring morale. Recognition came slowly, but meaningfully. Captain Harris formally praised the unit's performance in his report, singling out Emily for her decisive actions, calm leadership, and tactical foresight. Word spread quietly among the ranks. Soldiers who had once doubted her abilities now sought her guidance, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect. Emily had transformed from a silent observer into a trusted leader. Yet she did not let the attention change her. Her focus remained on preparation, observation, and readiness for whatever challenge lay ahead. Beyond immediate recognition, the experience left Emily profoundly aware of the weight of command and responsibility. She had led without authority, guided without loud proclamations, and influenced outcomes through calm presence and careful observation. The ambush had been a crucible, testing not only her tactical skill but her character. She had acted decisively under extreme stress, balancing the needs of her team, the mission, and the unpredictability of combat. Emily understood that heroism was not about accolades. It was about action, responsibility, and the quiet determination to protect others. By the end of the debriefing, the unit was ready to continue its mission. Defensive positions were reinforced, injured soldiers had been stabilized, and the valley was under control. Emily remained vigilant, scanning the horizon, checking equipment, and quietly ensuring that every soldier was prepared for the next challenge. The battle had left scars, both visible and invisible, but it had also revealed the resilience and strength of those who survived. Emily's leadership had turned potential disaster into victory, demonstrating that courage could be quiet yet profoundly effective. That evening, as she sat alone, Emily reflected on the events that had unfolded. The ambush had been terrifying, but it had also been a defining moment. She thought about the soldiers she had guided, the split-second decisions she had made, and the trust she had earned. Her journal, once filled with observations and reflections from training, now chronicled real combat experiences, lessons in leadership, courage, and the importance of quiet determination. She wrote not for recognition, but to remember the principles that had guided her through chaos. In the days that followed, Emily's reputation within the unit solidified. Soldiers who had once overlooked her now turned to her for advice, guidance, and support. Her quiet presence had become a cornerstone of unit cohesion. Even those who were initially skeptical acknowledged her calm decisiveness and strategic insight. Emily had demonstrated that heroism did not always require noise or spectacle. Sometimes it required observation, preparation, and the courage to act when it mattered most. The valley, now quiet, except for the occasional rustle of wind and the distant hum of vehicles, had become a testament to Emily Carter's leadership. The ambush had tested every skill she had cultivated during training, every lesson she had internalized, and every ounce of courage she had possessed. She had emerged not only unbroken, but transformed, recognized by her peers, trusted by her commanding officers, and more confident in her abilities than ever before. And yet, Emily remained humble. She did not seek accolades or praise. Her focus was always on the mission, her team, and preparation for the next challenge. The ambush had been a crucible, and she had proven herself, but she knew that the real test of courage and leadership was ongoing. The valley had taught her that heroism was not always immediate or visible, and that quiet determination often had the most profound impact. The valley was quiet now, the echoes of gunfire and chaos long gone. Soldiers patrolled cautiously, repairing defenses and tending to the wounded. Emily Carter moved through the camp, her movements steady and purposeful, as if every step were an extension of the calm control she had demonstrated during the ambush. Her team had survived, the mission was accomplished, and the valley was secure, but Emily knew that the true measure of her actions lay not in survival alone, but in the resilience and confidence she had instilled in those around her. Captain Harris called a formal meeting at the forward operating base, summoning the unit to recognize their bravery and coordinate for the next phase of the mission. Soldiers assembled, fatigue etched into their faces, but a new sense of determination glimmered in their eyes. Emily stood quietly among them, not at the front, not seeking attention, yet fully aware that all eyes would eventually turn toward her. This was a moment of reckoning, not for ego, but for acknowledgement of skill, courage, and leadership. The meeting began with Captain Harris praising the entire unit for their resilience under fire. "You faced a situation that could have ended badly," he said, voice steady but full of gravity. "Every one of you fought bravely, but there is one among us whose actions went beyond duty, whose calm, decisive leadership saved lives and turned the tide." His gaze landed on Emily. A hush fell over the room. Soldiers who had once overlooked her watched in stunned silence as their quietest member was acknowledged for extraordinary courage. Emily's first instinct was to deflect. She lowered her gaze, shaking her head slightly. "I didn't do it alone," she murmured. But Captain Harris would not let the moment pass. "Carter, step forward," he commanded. She complied, moving with the same calm precision that had guided her throughout training and battle. Standing before her unit, Emily felt the weight of responsibility, not pride, not vanity, but the undeniable gravity of leadership. The soldiers who once doubted her now looked at her with trust, respect, and admiration. He recounted the details of the ambush, how Emily had observed inconsistencies in terrain and intelligence, how she had guided her team through chaos, and how her flanking maneuver had turned a potentially disastrous ambush into a strategic victory. Each word resonated not as praise, but as testament to skill, courage, and foresight. Emily's peers began to realize what she had always known, that heroism was quiet, deliberate, and often unseen until action proved it. Her calm under pressure had become legendary in their eyes. After the formal acknowledgement, soldiers approached Emily individually. Some offered quiet congratulations, others simply nodded in respect. A young recruit, the same one she had steadied during the ambush, hesitated before shaking her hand. I don't know how you stayed so calm," he admitted. Emily smiled softly. "You stayed calm too," she said. "You followed the plan. That's how we survived. That's what matters." She had never sought recognition, but in that moment, she understood that leadership sometimes required accepting acknowledgement, not for herself, but for the team she had guided. The officers later convened to discuss commendations. Emily's name was mentioned repeatedly, her tactical acumen and leadership highlighted as exemplary. She received formal recognition, though she remained modest. Awards and commendations were tangible, but Emily's true satisfaction came from knowing that her actions had saved lives, strengthened her unit, and demonstrated the power of quiet determination. She had proven that courage is not always loud, and that heroism often emerges in the ability to act decisively under pressure. Yet even with accolades, Emily remained reflective. Alone in her tent that night, she wrote in her journal, detailing not only the actions she had taken, but the lessons learned. She wrote about observation, preparation, empathy, and the importance of maintaining calm under fire. Her journal, once a private record of training experiences, now chronicled real combat situations, strategic insights, and moments of courage. Emily understood that her story would serve as a guide, not just for herself, but for others who would face similar trials in the future. Her thoughts turned to the soldiers she had led, the ones who had struggled, the ones who had followed her, and the ones who had fought bravely alongside her. She realized that leadership was not measured by recognition alone, but by the confidence and resilience instilled in others. She had not merely survived the ambush. She had empowered her unit to survive, to act with clarity and courage, and to trust in one another. That, Emily knew, was the true mark of a leader. The weeks that followed solidified Emily's reputation. Stories of her calm decisiveness, strategic foresight, and quiet courage spread among other units. New recruits heard her name with respect, not as a legend of loud heroism, but as an example of how observation, preparation, and decisive action under pressure could change outcomes. Emily remained humble, mentoring quietly, guiding without ego, and ensuring that her team's cohesion remained strong. Her heroism was becoming a living lesson, a testament to the power of silent leadership. As the mission continued, Emily's unit operated with renewed confidence. Soldiers moved with precision, strategies were executed efficiently, and morale was high. Emily's influence extended beyond tactical decisions. Her presence instilled trust, her calm inspired courage, and her quiet leadership had become a cornerstone of the unit's effectiveness. The valley, once a scene of terror and chaos, had transformed into a symbol of resilience and teamwork. Emily's role in that transformation was undeniable, though she carried the burden with humility. In the quiet moments of reflection, Emily thought back to her journey from a timid, overlooked recruit to the steady leader who had guided her unit through their first major engagement. She remembered the long days of training, the grueling exercises, and the subtle victories that had prepared her for this moment. Every lesson, every observation, every act of patience had culminated in the ability to act decisively when it mattered most. Emily had discovered that true courage is often silent, understated, and unassuming, but its impact can be monumental. Eventually, the mission concluded, and Emily returned home with her unit. Though medals and recognition were waiting, she remained unchanged. She valued the lives saved, the lessons learned, and the quiet bonds forged in the heat of battle far more than public accolades. Her journey had taught her that heroism is not about noise or spectacle. It is about preparation, courage, and the steadfast determination to act when others hesitate. She had emerged not as a celebrity of war, but as a living example of quiet, extraordinary leadership. Emily's story, once invisible, had become a lesson for all who witnessed it. Soldiers would remember her composure, her tactical brilliance, and her unwavering commitment to her team. Leaders would cite her as an example of how observation, empathy, and decisive action define true courage. And Emily, ever humble, would continue her work quietly mentoring, guiding, and preparing for the next challenge secure, in the knowledge that heroism need not be loud to be extraordinary. In the end, Emily Carter had transformed not only herself, but those around her. The quiet recruit who had once gone unnoticed had become the guiding force that turned a potential disaster into triumph. Her courage, intellect, and calm under fire left a lasting legacy, a testament to the power of quiet strength, careful preparation, and the unwavering belief that one person's determination can change the fate of many. And though she remained quiet, humble, and reserved, Emily knew that the battle had proven one unshakable truth. Sometimes, the hero is the one who listens, observes, and acts when the world is at its most chaotic, and that hero could change everything.